Hey folks, I'm JC from One Shot Adventures, and this channel is all about how to run great one-shot adventures and also short campaigns. And this video is going to give you GMs some tips on what to avoid at your table at all costs. You see, one of my favorite places to run one-shots is, of course, at game conventions. Conventions challenge GMs to be at the top of their game. You have a strict 4 hours to run a game. Often have players who are complete strangers, with some of them totally unfamiliar with the game you're running. And you're often in rooms that aren't exactly quiet, meaning you have to hold everyone's attention. And trust me, this last one was a huge challenge for me at Gencon this year, where I had to run a dark noir Gotham City Batman game in the same room as an anime kindergarten RPG. Now that was a challenge worthy of Batman. But I had a blast at Gen Con, not just running games, but I also got to play in some. I got to venture into the dangers of Dungeon Crawl Classics, which is one of my favorite games. I played Pirate Borg and Weird Frontiers. I even played an unusual game where we all got to play as the evil monsters, and I got to play a toad creature that licked people's brains out. It was very weird, but also really fun. Unfortunately, I couldn't get into any Vaesen or Call of Cthulhu games, but hey, maybe next time. What do you mean all the investigations are sold out? As I'm sure many of you GMs have experienced, switching from being a GM to a player is a very curious thing. Playing with a new GM is always a teaching moment for me. A great new GM can inspire me, gives me new techniques to steal, or just shows how genres can be run very differently than how I would run them. Playing with a mediocre or inexperienced GM can also teach valuable lessons. And even when I have a so-so experience in a game, I try to take away learnings. And so today I'm going to share some of those learnings with you. Real world, don't do this at home tips that I saw firsthand at Gen Con this year. Now, before I jump into this list, a disclaimer. I have respect for anyone who has the courage to GM at a giant game convention like Gen Con, especially if you're running your own adventure that you authored. It's difficult, it takes confidence, and it doesn't always go right even if you're a great GM. So while these are criticisms that I saw at Gen Con, I present them so that we can all learn and get better together, regardless of whether you're GMing for your friends at the kitchen table or in the middle of a loud hotel in Indianapolis. So here we go. Number 1, don't look up rules unless it's absolutely critical. Keep the game moving. I was playing in an Old West horror game, one of my favorite genres, and our posse was sneaking into some dark old mine tunnels that we knew would be trouble. We came across a decrepit old steam machine that was up and running and clearly up to no good. It was digging where it should not. We knew that we had to act fast. Our gadgeteer pulled out his electricity cannon and unloaded into the machine. And we cheered because he rolled a ridiculous amount of damage. And then our GM spent 10 minutes looking through the rules to see what happened. I'm not sure if he was actually looking up rules or something in the adventure, but it absolutely halted the action, and I'm not kidding when it was 10 minutes. None of us at the table, being strangers to each other, wanted to be rude and be like, hey buddy, let's just keep this going. And so it was awkward, and this happened a few more times in the session, turning what was a pretty compelling adventure with a good story into one that was a bit of a slog. So the lesson here is just make a fast ruling. Look up the rules after the game when it's all over. It would have been fine if the GM had just said, all right, it explodes spectacularly in shards of iron. Pepper all of you for D4 damage. If he just made something up and kept the game moving and maybe improv later if he got something wrong, we all would have had more fun. Number 2, make sure characters are relatively balanced for your adventure. One-shots almost always use pre-generated characters. Skipping character creation helps players leap into the action and also gives them new types of characters that they might not ordinarily play. I love pre-generated characters in one-shots. But a couple of times at Gen Con, I saw that the characters you could pick from weren't very balanced with each other. And I'm not talking about how One character might be 3rd level, another 1st level. I'm talking that they were equally valuable in the adventure. So this was never obvious from the start. You only figured it out as the game went on. For example, in one of my Dungeon Crawl Classics adventures, my character was a spellcaster with the ability to charm people, turn invisible, and cast a pretty powerful flame spell. Now, in a typical DCC dungeon crawl, that character would have been balanced by fighters and thieves with their own specialties. But the mission that we were on was an investigation. It played out more like Call of Cthulhu than a traditional DCC game. That was fine, it was fun, but what that meant was that my charm person spell was crazy powerful. I quickly realized I could just charm guards and other NPCs and extract information with ease. And my invisibility meant that I could be the stealthiest party member, sneaking in everywhere by myself and figuring out what was happening while everyone else stood outside.
Oh yes, the wizard in the party. Oh, he was quite effective. Yes, well, as the rogue in the party with an amazing stealth skill and a charisma of 17, I just want to say that the moment he turns visible again, I'm going to backstab the motherfucker.
After the initial thrill of feeling incredibly powerful, I realized I should probably stop using those abilities. I wanted everyone else at the table to have their moments too. But another player might not have shown that restraint, and that could have drained the fun at the entire table as everybody watched me do most of the important stuff. So the takeaway? Balance your characters not just mechanically, but so that their moments to shine fit the spirit of your adventure. Number 3, give your players good reference material. A lot of RPGs require players to have a book at the table to really play their character effectively. For example, unless you're playing Shadowdark where a spell can be written in just one sentence, most wizards in RPGs need their spell descriptions to know exactly what their spells can do. Most GMs don't even know all the spells, so this is really important information to have. So unless you know with 100% certainty that your players are experts at the rules and know all this stuff, always print out the required material for your players and just staple it to their character sheet. I was in one adventure where 3 of us players had magic, but there was only one book to pass around, which made everything just slow down. And we weren't that familiar with the book, so not only were we looking stuff up, we were always like hunting through the book trying to figure out what page our spells were on. One clever player, he's smarter than I was, he even took out his phone and took photos of his spells, which is really smart, but not ideal since he was always squinting and zooming on his phone. While in reverse, I played in many games where GMs went out of their effort to make sure that every player had a custom spell or special ability packet, so I could easily look up my abilities in downtime and be ready to go when it was my turn. I saw a GURPS GM print out a wonderful one-page reference with all the common actions in that game, so even a brand new player could figure out the basics of the system in a minute or 2. Now, this doesn't mean overwhelm people with information. I wouldn't recommend including characters with dozens of spells and a 150-page rule addendum. Just print out enough to make it easier for newer players to have what they need to play. This is also a great guideline for you GMs just playing games at home, because I know us GMs always want to get players to play new games and new systems, and they're always like, we'd rather play 5th edition, we know it so well. But if you can ease people in and be like, look, I printed out what you need for this game, you're just going to get a lot more buy-in from your players. So this isn't just a convention-only tip. Number 4, it's okay to end the game early. It's tough to predict game length in an RPG. Sometimes you have players just blaze through the adventure because they got lucky or were clever or found shortcuts, and other times groups like to explore every nook and cranny and don't get through everything because they have to explore every location and talk to every NPC. I had the former issue in a couple of my games, largely finishing the adventure an hour or so early. In one case, the boss battle started and my character just ran up, rolled a crazy good critical hit on the boss and killed him in one blow, which instantly shaved 30 minutes off the adventure.
All right, friends, it's gonna take several hits to take this beastie down. Oh dear. Well, you guys can loot the body if you want.
But that's okay. If that happens, congratulate your players, high-five them, and send them on their way. Because if you don't, well, in one case, I think the GM felt compelled to keep the fun going for the full session length, even though our group finished early. So he started having us rolling on a lot of random tables to see what happened to our characters after the adventure had ended. And well, this was fun for the first 5 or 10 minutes. You multiply that times 6 players and lots of rolling, and well, it just got weird and nutty, at least for me. That GM should have remembered the #1 rule of entertainment: leave the players wanting more. And end your adventures when they make sense to end. This also applies to GMs running groups at home. If you hit a place that feels like a natural stopping point in your adventure, just call it and end it there. Go play some video games or just chat at the table. It's perfectly okay to end adventures where they should. And the reverse is true as well. One of my friends said he played in a game at Gencon. It was an investigative horror game, and the GM wasn't really helping move the players along, so they spent a lot of time exploring dead ends and getting a little frustrated, and as a result, they only made it halfway through the adventure. Time just ran out, and the bored players fled the table. So GMs, if you're on a time limit, whether you're at a convention or your players have to get home to the kids, just think about ways that you can get the players to the big climax. Know the adventure you're running well enough to understand what you can skip or compress without really breaking anything. I actually had to do this in one of my games at Gen Con, where 2 of my players told me in advance that they had to leave about 20-30 minutes early because they had to haul over to the stadium for another game, and that's a really long walk in Indianapolis. So that meant that I had to do some trimming here and there to get everybody to the big finale on time. While the players did miss out on stuff that I'd consider pretty cool, I actually don't think my players noticed, and they all left the table feeling like they had experienced a robust adventure where they had fun and they participated and they got a big ending. So don't be afraid to improvise to end your adventure in a strong way. Number 5, always bring extra dice. Okay, so this is an easy rule, but it's an important one. It's worth mentioning to every GM planning to run a game at a con. While this didn't actually happen to me, I heard this a few times from several players. Just bring extra dice for your players, especially if you aren't using a typical D20 system where most people carry those around. One GM told me that he sat down at a vampire table as a player, which uses a lot of D10s, and while he had enough for himself, no one else had D10s, so they had to pool their dice and share, which really slowed the game down. So I know all of you watching this video have buckets of dice in your closet. You probably have too many and are a little embarrassed like I am, but bring them with you, share them, and then your adventures will go that much smoother at a con. And that's it. Those are the lessons that I learned from a few awkward moments at Gen Con. And so hopefully this is useful to you GMs regardless of where you're GMing. Have you learned any good lessons from some non-ideal game sessions? Well, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your war stories. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more GM tips and tricks and reviews and that sort of thing, go hit that like and subscribe button like you would an evil Steam machine. Until next time, I'm JC, and I'll see you soon.